Welcome to Stories of a Christian Girl. I've said this before. I can tell when the Lord really is really trying to get something across because there's so much opposition when it comes to posting this video. This is probably my third time recording this, but it's okay. I have something a little different to share, and I thank God for using me as his vessel, and that he trusts me, right, to share what he's given me to share. And so I pray that you receive this in the heart that it's given. And the thing that I believe, and you'll see me looking down because I'm looking at my notes, because I just want to make sure that I am sticking to what is at hand. And the thing that I believe God is really trying to express here is that he is destroying the high places. Okay. What might be considered a high place, you might ask? And this is anything that is exalting itself above God. Today, I'm going to be coming from the book of Ezekiel, and I'm going to bounce around between a few chapters. I'm going to bounce around between a few versions, but I actually want to start in Ezekiel chapter 6, verse 1. Now, verse 1, and I'll start in the New King James Version. I'm just going to read it verbatim. Now the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face toward the mountains of Israel, and prophesy against them, and say, O mountains of Israel, hear the word of the Lord God. Thus says the Lord God to the mountains, to the hills, to the ravines, and to the valleys. Indeed, even I, will bring a sword against you, and I will destroy your high places. Okay. Even the fact that the chapter opens with God telling Ezekiel to set his face toward the mountain of Israel to prophesy against them. And so he's not talking about people who are unchurched, okay? Even if I scroll back up to Ezekiel chapter. Okay, so if we remember, I said I would bounce a little bit back and forth. If we go back to Ezekiel chapter 3, and in verses 5 through 6, this is God speaking to Ezekiel, and he's saying, For you are not sent to a people of unfamiliar speech and of hard language, but to the house of Israel. Not too many people of unfamiliar speech and of hard language, whose words you cannot understand. So he's not talking to unchurched people. He's talking to the church. He's talking to people who speak his language, right? And I believe when God is talking about the mountains of Israel, he's specifically talking about people who have exalted themselves as unmovable, untouchable, as big, as higher and above God. Okay. And the critical commentary also elaborates on mountains of Israel and explains it in this manner as well. Okay. So if we go back to to chapter 6, verses 4 through 5, he's explaining more of um, what God will be doing, right, to the high places. So he's also talking about the altars shall be desolate, the images shall be broken, they'll be cast down, slay men before your idols. So I'm kind of paraphrasing a bit. So these key things stuck out to me, right? Altars, images, idols. Altars, what is an altar, right? That is the where you are making your sacrifice to God. And it's like, where are you making your altar to, right? Are you building an altar for religious leaders? Are you building an altar for your pride, right? You're making these sacrifices for the sake of people pleasing. And then when we think about images, we should be made in the image of God. And even Peter tells us to, we're following him, right, as we follow Christ. But is that what we're really doing? It seems like we want people to be made in our image. If your Christianity does not look like my Christianity, it can't be right. If your walk with Christ doesn't look like my walk, then it can't be right. And so I believe God is speaking to, in Ezekiel and even now, to some religious leaders. And honestly, you don't even have to necessarily fall in that typical category, right, of a religious leader. But anything or anybody who is exalting themselves above God, that's that high place, right? Anytime you are creating images, and I'm obviously not talking about like your selfies, okay, but your images, and you want that to reflect um, our will rather the will of the Lord, right? That's not of God. And then this third thing here is these are idols. And so that's anything that we are worshiping and putting before God. I'm not going to put any person, anything before God. No one comes before God. No one's comfort comes before God. I'm not going to give more time to these things and idolize these things, right? Over God, right? Over God. And so not only will God tear down these high places and all the other things that he mentioned in regards to the altars, the images, and the idols, but there's something that really stuck out to me where he talked about your works shall be abolished. And so Ezekiel chapter 6, verse 6, it says, in all your dwelling places, the cities shall be laid waste, and the high places shall be desolate, so that your altars may be laid waste and made desolate. Your idols may be broken and made to cease. Your incense altars may be cut down, and your works may be abolished. My God. So I looked up, abolished. What is that? Okay. And that is to end the observation or effect of something, right? Such as a law. Even ending the effect of something, to completely do away with. And I added a little bit of my own sprinkle, as if it never existed. So that means all of your works, all the things that you did in his name, oh Lord, I preached in your name, I prophesied in your name. And he says, depart from me, I know you not. Right? That your works are being abolished. None of your works, none of the things that you're doing matter if you are doing all these other things. If you are creating these high places, if you are creating these idols, if you're putting yourself in this high place, right? All of your works and good deeds won't matter if you are doing all those things. Okay? And you may, he can't, oh no, God is not talking about the church, folks. And going back to Ezekiel chapter 3, verse 20, he says it even again here when he's telling Ezekiel, he's really letting Ezekiel know you are the watchman. And I remember Prophetess Barbara Calloway, she spoke about the watchman and how you are elevated, you have this elevated position to see things and to warn people, right? That's what the watchman on the wall is doing. And so God told Ezekiel, the watchman, your job is to warn these people, right? You're warning the righteous and the wicked. And so God gives further instructions in verse 3 through 20, or I guess maybe not even instructions, but even explanation. So, verse 20, again, when a righteous man turns from his righteousness and commits iniquity, and I lay a stumbling block before him, he shall die. Because you did not give him warning, he shall die in his sin, and his righteousness, which he has done, shall not be remembered. It won't be remembered. And just to finish the verse up, but his blood I will require at your hand. And I believe, and this is something that, Barbara Calloway, Prophetess Calloway, she even said on one of those prayer lives where she was talking about how God is calling up different people to be watchmen. You know how they say something, say something? It's the same thing spiritually. God is showing you some things for a reason because he's going to bring his judgment. And he wants to give people an opportunity to turn to him, right? He wants to warn people. Now, I believe that there are some people who are so high up that they can't even hear any warnings, right? They've placed themselves so high. And so we have to be really careful with how we're moving, how we're operating, how we are placing anything before God. Okay, and the very last thing is God is going to bring judgment to his people. And taking a step back to chapter 5, God is going to bring judgment to his people. Okay? That's the last thing. He's bringing judgment. And if I'm taking a step back to chapter 5, and he's talking to Ezekiel and he's telling him to take out the scales and divide his hair up. And he's really just giving him an analogy for how God is going to pass judgment against Jerusalem, right? Against Israel. And oftentimes, when you hear scales mentioned, they're talking about some sort of judgment. Even when you think about like the little logo or icon for a lot of law firms, or if you ever saw some kind of plaque or whatever, anything related to law, you always see scales. It's always talking about the balancing of the scales, right? And so even the fact that he told Ezekiel to pull out his scale already lets you know, oh, he's gonna balance the judgment. He's gonna even it out. And so 1/3 of, I'll just, let me skip down to verses 11 through 12. I'll skip down to verse 12. 1/3 of you shall die of the pestilence and be consumed with famine in your midst, and 1/3 shall fall by the sword all around you. And I will scatter another third to all the winds, and I will draw out a sword after them. And when you think about what is pestilence, that's sickness. Even in the Amplified version, it says it as disease. And consumed with famine. Famine, you don't have food. Well, when you really think about it, during the biblical, I guess, historical context, their crops, their harvest, that was also their livelihood. That was also even considered like what, monetary. So when I think about this famine, I think about this lack of harvest coming in, and I think about how similar that is to this time of recession that we're really facing. And then he said that 1/3 shall fall by the sword around you. And so that is kind of like that violent, intentional killing. Being, I don't, there's really no other plain way to say that. And then the last one is scattering across to all the winds and then drawing out a sword after them. So I really see this as even being scattered. You see a lot of people who are forced to leave the country. You see people who are not allowed back in. You see people are scattered everywhere, right? Um, and so I just think there will be a scattering. Okay. That is all I have to share in this moment. Um, I believe that someone will hear this and maybe it will confirm what God is already telling you. Maybe this will sound brand new. Maybe you will take this and you will pray on it. Maybe God is showing you a dream. But I believe that for those who hear this and have a heart to receive, that the Lord will show you what to do with this word. Okay. So, like I said, today was a little different than how we have normally done Stories of a Christian Girl. Please continue to tune in, like, share, subscribe. Yep, and I pray that you're blessed. Okay, thank you so much, and take care. Bye.